Chicago, late autumn. The kind of rain that feels like penance fell over the city, soft at first, then relentless, like it was trying to wash away the sins of someone watching from above. Inside the West Side Community Hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed quietly, reflecting on the wet floor tiles. Maya Johnson's shoes squeaked as she walked down the corridor, holding a clipboard against her chest. She had grown used to this rhythm, the antiseptic air, the echo of machines, the muffled sobs in the waiting room. It was her world now, 5 years after she had been left behind. 5 years since the headlines called her husband the youngest billionaire in New York's tech empire. 5 years since that same man, Alexander King, had walked out of their small apartment with a suitcase and silence. He had said, "I'll come back when I'm ready." But he never did. Until that day. The storm outside bled into the hospital's front doors as they slid open, letting in a rush of cold air and the smell of rain. A tall figure stepped in, drenched, his white shirt clinging to his skin, the collar of his charcoal coat dripping. He looked like a man who'd come from another world, the kind built of glass towers and private jets, not broken tiles and leaky ceilings. Maya froze. The pen slipped from her hand. Alexander. The name echoed inside her head, like a wound remembering its pain. She wanted to turn away, to pretend the years had erased him, but her body betrayed her every nerve, recognizing what her heart had sworn to forget. He saw her too, and in that instant, the polished confidence he wore like armor cracked. His mouth parted, but no words came out. He held a folder, a donation pledge, the hospital's charity fund printed across the top. Of course, money. That was his language. Dr. Johnson, he greeted softly, as if pretending she was just another professional contact. Mr. King, she replied, her tone flat, surgical. You're far from Wall Street. He smiled faintly. So are you. They stood across from each other, separated by a reception desk and 5 years of unspoken things. The rain continued its confession on the glass windows behind them. I came to make a donation, he said, finally handing the folder to her. His fingers brushed hers, a ghost of warmth, a memory of what used to be home. To support the clinic's women's health initiative. Generous, she murmured, refusing to meet his eyes. Is this guilt or PR? His jaw tightened. Neither. I heard you built this place from nothing. You thought a check could erase the nothing you left me with. Her voice was quiet but sharp, honed by years of surviving alone. Silence expanded between them, like a wound reopening. Alexander's gaze softened. I didn't come because of money, he said, voice barely above the hum of the hospital. I came because I never really left. Maya laughed, not with humor, but disbelief. You think love is a stock you can reinvest when it's convenient? Her words hit him like rain against a cracked windshield, small but relentless. Before he could answer, a small voice echoed from the far end of the hallway. Mommy. A boy about 8 peeked around the corner. His hair dark and soft curls stuck up in every direction. He was holding a plastic dinosaur, his face lighting up when he saw her. Liam, Maya whispered, kneeling to his height. You're supposed to be napping in the staff room. I woke up, he said, rubbing his eyes. Then he noticed the man standing behind her. Who's that? Alexander's entire world tilted. He looked at the child, at the familiar line of the jaw, the same hazel eyes that used to laugh at him from the other side of the bed. His son. Liam tilted his head, curious, unguarded. Do I know you? Mr. Maya's heart clenched. No, sweetheart. He's just... She hesitated, the word, choking her. Someone I used to know. Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but he couldn't trust his voice. So he simply crouched down, his eyes level with the boy's. You like dinosaurs? He asked softly. Liam nodded. They're brave, even when they know they're gonna disappear. Alexander swallowed hard. Even when they know they're gonna disappear. The words felt like punishment and prayer at once. Later that evening, the rain stopped, but the tension hadn't. Maya stood in her small office staring at the donation form, still lying on her desk. His signature was there, bold, precise. The same one that once signed their marriage certificate, the same that signed her absence into existence. The door creaked. Alexander stepped inside, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Truce, he asked, offering one. She didn't take it. You don't get to walk in here like the last 5 years didn't happen. I know, he said. But maybe I can start by not walking away this time. Maya turned toward the window, the city glistening with rain beyond the glass. You left when I needed you most, Alex, when I was drowning. Do you know what it's like to give birth alone to build a life from ruins? He closed his eyes. Every day since I've tried to imagine it, and I still can't forgive myself. She exhaled, tired, brittle. Then stop trying to be forgiven. Just stay gone. He nodded slowly, the weight of her words pressing into his chest. But before leaving, he placed a sealed envelope on her desk. I also didn't come here by accident, he said. Something's wrong with my heart. Maya frowned. What do you mean? Physically, he murmured. The doctors say it's stress. I say it's unfinished business. Her professional instinct flared, despite herself. You should get it checked properly. Northwestern has a cardiac. I already did, he interrupted. They said it's nothing life-threatening. Just something that reminds me I'm still human. She wanted to laugh again cruelly, maybe, but instead she sighed. You always were human, Alex. You just forgot how to act like one. He smiled faintly. Maybe you could remind me. That was too much. She turned away, gripping the back of her chair until her knuckles whitened. Don't, she said, voice trembling. Don't make this harder. He hesitated at the doorway, rainwater still dripping from his coat. I won't, he whispered, not tonight. When he left, Maya sank into the chair, staring at the envelope. She didn't want to open it, didn't want to touch another piece of his world, but something in her chest, that stubborn curiosity that had once loved him, reached out. Inside was a letter. Maya, if I could trade every dollar I have for one more morning of hearing you laugh, I would. But that's not how life works. Money built my empire, but your silence built my hell. This donation isn't charity. It's me trying to keep one good thing alive, because you made it, not me. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance to do something right. Her tears fell before she could stop them. The paper blurred. From the window, the streetlight flickered, reflecting his silhouette walking away toward the parking lot. Liam's reflection appeared beside hers. On the glass, the boy yawning, hugging his dinosaur. Mommy, are you crying? He asked sleepily. She wiped her face quickly. No, baby, just tired. He nodded, curling against her arm. That man. He looked sad. Maya looked out again. The street was empty now, only the trail of wet footprints fading into the dark. Yes, she whispered. He did, but as she turned off the light and led her son down the hall, she didn't notice the small card that had slipped from the envelope, a hospital referral form. Patient name, Alexander King. Diagnosis, myocardial weakness, pending further evaluation. She froze when she saw it the next morning. Something inside her, something buried under 5 years of anger, stirred again. For the first time, she wondered if the man who broke her heart might not just be seeking forgiveness, but time. and time she knew had a cruel way of running out. Chicago in winter had its own kind of silence, not peaceful, but heavy. The kind that crept into the bones, into words that were never spoken. Snow powdered the roofs of the community clinic, and from the frosted windows, the city looked far away, almost unreal. Inside, Maya stood over a stack of paperwork, her face lit by the dull glow of her computer screen. The power hummed, the heater groaned, and she rubbed her temples. Numbers blurred before her eyes. Donations, budgets, medical supplies. Every dollar mattered here. Everyone meant another patient treated, another night she could sleep, knowing she'd made a dent in the world's cruelty. A soft knock broke the rhythm. She didn't need to look up. "Come in." Alexander entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The faint aroma of roasted beans filled the air, cutting through the smell of disinfectant. He placed one near her hand, not too close. He had learned to keep a respectful distance. "You're still here," she said, not a question. He smiled lightly. "I could say the same about you." Maya's eyes flicked toward the folder under his arm. "More donations. Partnership proposals," he said. "If we can secure a deal with the city board, your clinic could triple its funding." Your clinic. The phrase landed softly, yet she caught the faint emphasis he wasn't claiming it. "Not yet." She sighed. "You don't have to stay involved, Alex. You've done enough. I'm not here because I have to," he said quietly. "I'm here because I need to." The words hung between them, fragile and almost warm, but Maya couldn't afford warmth. Not from him. Over the next few weeks he stayed. He attended board meetings, filled out endless forms, even rolled up his sleeves to help the volunteers paint the new wing. Every time she looked up, he was there, tall, focused, calm, in a way that felt different from before. Gone was the man who used to measure everything by profit margins. This one measured things by heartbeats and people's names. Still, trust was not a language Maya remembered how to speak. She watched him interact with the patients, the quiet empathy he showed the elderly woman in bed 5, the patients with a boy terrified of needles. It was disarming, and that made her angry. Anger was safer than hope. "You don't belong here," she told him one afternoon when he offered to fix a flickering ceiling light. He looked down at her, his face smeared with dust, a grin ghosting his lips. "Neither do you. But here we are." She wanted to argue, but the words never came. That night, the storm rolled in. The city's power grid failed again. The clinic fell into sudden darkness. Somewhere down the hall, a patient screamed. A generator sputtered to life, but the emergency lights barely reached the main corridor. Maya grabbed a flashlight and rushed to check the wards. Alexander followed behind his shadow, stretching long against the walls. When they reached the pediatric wing, the power flickered, then died again. Maya's breath clouded in the cold air. She moved instinctively, checking oxygen tanks, calming parents, soothing crying children. Alexander watched her, the calm precision of her hands, the unwavering gentleness in her voice. "She's stronger than she ever was before," he thought. "Stronger than me." Minutes blurred into hours until the storm outside softened to a drizzle. The generator finally whirred back to life. Maya exhaled, leaning against a counter, exhausted. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, brushing hair from her face. "I've had worse nights." He handed her a small candle from his pocket, one of the emergency kits he'd found earlier. The flame flickered between them, painting her skin in gold and shadow. She stared into it, her voice almost breaking. "Do you have any idea what it's like?" she whispered. "To raise a child alone, to smile for them when all you want to do is scream, to wake up every day pretending you're not angry." The silence in the room deepened. Alexander's throat tightened. He set the candle down, its light trembling as if it too felt the weight of her words. "I don't know that pain," he admitted, "but I know what it's like to lose them, both of you, and to lose myself in the process." She looked at him, then really looked, and for a heartbeat, the bitterness inside her cracked. "You left us for power," she said softly. "Now you're here because that power finally cost you everything." "Maybe," he murmured, "or maybe because I finally realized what I had before I lost it." Her eyes glistened, but her face stayed unreadable. "You can't rewrite history, Alex." "No," he agreed. "But maybe I can stop it from repeating." They sat in silence for a long while, the candle slowly melting between them. The shadows shifted as if the room were breathing. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You know what's strange? I thought I'd feel nothing if I ever saw you again. But I do feel something." He looked up, searching her face. "What is it?" Fear, she said. "Because the last time I trusted you, it cost me everything." He wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. The distance between them was sacred now, an invisible scar that neither dared to touch. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. The sound reminded Maya of the night Liam was born, the chaos, the loneliness, the sound of rain hitting the hospital roof as she held her newborn alone. She had promised herself that night she would never need anyone again, not even him. But tonight, in the wavering candlelight, that promise felt like a cage. The next morning, she found him asleep on one of the benches in the corridor, his coat draped over his shoulders. A file folder rested on his chest, city funding documents, half-filled forms, and a hand-drawn diagram of the new pediatric wing. He looked older somehow, as if the years had finally caught up to him. There was a vulnerability she had never seen before, the kind that wealth couldn't conceal. Maya stood there longer than she meant to, watching him breathe. Something in her softened, then hardened again. She couldn't let sympathy blur the lines. She took the folder, gently flipping through the pages. Near the bottom was a small sticky note written in his handwriting. "For you and for him, whatever it takes." She closed it quickly, as if the words burned. By afternoon, the clinic was buzzing again. Reporters had caught wind of Alexander King's philanthropic comeback. They crowded outside the entrance cameras, flashing microphones pointed like weapons. Maya felt her stomach twist. She hated this, the spectacle, the invasion. Everything she'd built here was supposed to be quiet, real, not another headline. When Alexander arrived, she confronted him before he could step inside. "You did this." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The media, the attention, the donations are good, but I won't let this clinic become another chapter in your redemption arc." His expression darkened. "You think I called them Maya? I've spent years trying to get out of the spotlight." "Then why does it always follow you?" she snapped. "Because you need to be seen as the hero." "I'm not the hero," he said sharply. "You are." Her breath caught. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I'm just trying to stand beside you without breaking anything else." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the old fear lingered, that he'd leave again once the guilt faded. That evening, after the reporters left, Maya found Liam in the break room coloring dinosaurs with one of the nurses. "Mommy," he said brightly, "Mr. King said he's helping you fix the clinic. Is he your boss?" She froze. "No, sweetheart. He's an old friend." Liam grinned. "He's nice. He said brave people build things, not just buy them." Maya's heart twisted. That was exactly what she used to tell Alexander years ago, when he was still just a dreamer, coding in a tiny apartment. Back before the money came, before the boardrooms and the silence. She smiled faintly. "Yeah." He learned that from someone. Later that night, as the city lights shimmered through the clinic windows, Alexander sat alone in his car, the engine off. The snow had started again, soft, slow flakes drifting across the windshield. He pulled out a bottle of pills from the glove compartment, his medication. His hand trembled slightly as he opened it. One pill rolled across the dashboard, catching a glint of the streetlight. He stared at it, his jaw clenched. He didn't want Maya to know, not yet, about the condition that shadowed every heartbeat, the reminder that time was thinning. But the test results were clear. If stress continued, the damage could become permanent. His body was failing in ways no amount of wealth could fix. He swallowed the pill, leaned back, and closed his eyes. In her apartment across town, Maya couldn't sleep. The candle from last night still sat on her kitchen counter, half burned. She found herself staring at it, at the melted wax pooling like tears. She lit it again, just to see the light. The flame flickered weakly, but didn't die. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she whispered, "Stay." At dawn, the clinic's intercom buzzed with a call from the city board. The funding proposal had been approved. But the email attached to the confirmation came with a note Maya didn't expect. All meetings will be handled through Mr. King's private office in Manhattan. She stared at the screen, heart sinking. He said he wanted to stay, but had he already begun to leave again? Rumors travel faster than truth, especially in a city that feeds on whispers. Within a week, the story had spread through the hospital halls. Maya Johnson was being bankrolled by her ex-husband, the billionaire, Alexander King. By the second week, it had evolved. She was using the charity for personal gain. By the third, people stopped looking her in the eye. Maya heard the murmurs behind doors, the half-swallowed sentences in the break room. "He's buying his way back into her life," someone said. "She always lands on her feet." She didn't respond. She just smiled, nodded, and kept walking. But inside, the shame stung. Not because the rumors were cruel, but because a small part of her feared they might sound true to anyone who didn't know her heart. Alexander found out through an article online. King's former wife heads charity, revived by his philanthropy. The photo showed her standing in front of the clinic's new wing, sunlight hitting her skin like bronze. Behind her, barely visible in the glass reflection, was him, blurred, distant, watching. He stared at the image for a long time, jaw tight. The headline wasn't wrong, but it wasn't right either. It took the one good thing they were building, the fragile trust, the slow healing, and twisted it into spectacle. When he arrived at the clinic later that day, Maya was in her office, eyes red from exhaustion. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked, before he could speak. He nodded. "I'll handle it. I can release a statement, make it clear this is a professional collaboration." "Nothing more. Nothing more," she repeated, her tone sharp enough to cut. "Is that what you want them to hear?" He hesitated. "I just want them to stop hurting you." She stood, arms crossed. "You can't fix this with a press release, Alex. The more you try, the more it looks like you're rescuing me." "Maybe I am," he said softly. That was the wrong answer. Her voice cracked. "Don't you dare make yourself the hero in a story you abandoned halfway through." The silence that followed was colder than the February air. She didn't go home that night. Instead, Maya drove to the old West Side neighborhood, where it all began, the warehouse they'd once turned into a community space years ago. It was where the King Johnson initiative had started, before it collapsed, just like their marriage. The building stood abandoned now, the bricks weathered, the sign half fallen. She unlocked the rusted door with a key she'd kept all these years. The smell of dust and memory greeted her like an old ghost. She didn't expect him to follow, but he did. Alexander stood at the doorway, quiet, hesitant. "You still had the key." She didn't turn around. "I almost threw it away once, but then I thought someone should remember how it started." He stepped closer, brushing dust off a table that still held faint outlines of where papers once lay. I remember he said, "We had a single printer that jammed every 30 minutes. And coffee that tasted like cardboard," she added. For a moment, the corners of her mouth softened. "We thought we could save the world with 50 volunteers and 100 dreams." "And your laugh," he murmured. That was the only thing that made it all feel real. She looked at him, then tired, but not cruel. "You don't get to remember me in pieces, Alex. Not when you left before the story was finished." A gust of wind blew through the broken window, scattering dust into the air. Something fluttered down from a shelf, a framed photograph face down on the floor. Alexander bent to pick it up, his hands trembling slightly. The glass was cracked, but the image beneath was intact. It was a photo from the early days, Maya laughing mid-sentence, sunlight catching the curls in her hair. Alexander was beside her, looking at her instead of the camera. For a long time, he just stared. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. "God, I'd forgotten how much I used to look at you like that." Maya took the frame from him, brushing the dust away. Her reflection appeared in the cracked glass beside her younger self, two versions of the same woman separated by time and hurt. "You didn't forget," she said. "You just stopped looking." He sat down on one of the old wooden benches, the weight of memory pressing down like gravity. "I thought success would make it easier," he said quietly. "If I could build something big enough, it would drown the guilt." "And did it?" He shook his head. It just made the silence louder. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady drip of rain through the roof. Finally, Maya sat beside him, not close enough to touch. "You built an empire out of fear, Alex. Fear of not being enough. Fear of needing someone. And I kept trying to be enough for both of us." His eyes burned. "I know." "No," she said softly. "You don't. Because if you did, you'd stop showing up trying to fix the things you broke. Some things don't need repair. They need acknowledgement." He looked at her eyes full of something raw, regret maybe, or the realization that redemption doesn't come wrapped in apologies. "Maya," he whispered, "if I could turn back time, you'd do the same," she interrupted. "Because you were who you were back then, and I was someone who believed you'd stay." Her voice cracked on the last word. A single drop of rain fell from the ceiling and landed on the photograph between them, smudging the edge of her smile. Alexander wiped it gently, but the mark stayed, a faint water stain across the image like a scar. He stared at it. "Money can buy 1,000 second chances," he said quietly, "but not a single lost minute." She looked up at him, then her expression unreadable. "You finally understand." "I do," he said, "but understanding doesn't fix what's gone." "No," she replied. "It doesn't, but maybe it stops us from ruining what's left." For the first time in years, there was no anger in her tone, just fatigue, a fragile kind of peace. He stood, exhaling. "The board wants me back in New York," he said carefully. "They're threatening to pull out of the deal if I don't return." Maya's heart lurched. "So that's it. You're leaving again." "I don't want to," he said. "But if I stay, they'll kill the funding for your clinic." Her silence said everything. The irony was cruel. He could only protect her by walking away again. She nodded slowly, forcing composure. "Then go. Save what can be saved." He hesitated, searching her face. "And what about us?" "There is no us, Alex," she said, voice trembling. "Just two people trying to do right by what's already broken." He opened his mouth to protest, but the words dissolved. So instead he just nodded, eyes glistening. As he turned to leave, Maya called after him, "Take the photo." He froze. She held it out to him, cracked glass and all. A reminder, she said. He took it gently, his fingertips brushing hers for the briefest second. Of what we lost. No, she whispered. Of what we built before we forgot how to keep it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed in 1,000 reflections, each one fractured like the photo he now held. He walked toward his car, the photograph pressed to his chest. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man trying to fix the past. He felt like someone mourning it. And as he started the engine, he glanced at his phone, a message from his assistant, blinking on the screen, urgent. Board meeting rescheduled. Health report required before travel. Dr. Patel insists on new tests, potential cardiac deterioration. He stared at it, the ache in his chest pulsing like a quiet drum. The steering wheel blurred as his vision dimmed for a second. He took a deep breath and started driving, ignoring the way his hands trembled. Back in the warehouse, Maya stood alone, staring at the empty doorway he'd just walked through. The echo of footsteps lingered, faint and final. She looked down at the table where the photograph had been and saw what lay beneath it. A folded note, yellowed with time, tucked under the wood. She opened it. The handwriting was his from years ago. For when you stop believing in me, keep believing in what we started. Her throat tightened. She folded the note back, pressing it to her heart. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know whether to hope or to let go. Outside, thunder rolled again, faint, distant, but coming closer. That night, Alexander's plane ticket to New York sat unused on his desk. His assistant called twice. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood in front of the clinic, looking up at the lit windows, one of them glowing with Maya's shadow. Then, as his phone buzzed again, his chest tightened sharply, a pain blooming deep, sudden, and merciless. The morning it happened, the sky was a flat, merciless gray, the kind that warned of storms not in the clouds but in the heart. Maya woke to the vibration of her phone. Dozens of messages, missed calls, notifications buzzing like a swarm of hornets. At first, she thought something had happened at the clinic, a patient emergency, a city inspection. But when she opened the first message, her stomach dropped. Charity director accused of using ex-husband's money to restore her reputation. Below the headline was a photo of her stepping out of the clinic with Alexander behind her, his hand reaching for the car door. To the camera's eye, it looked intimate, intentional. By noon, it was everywhere. Local news gossip sites, social media hashtags. Hashtag billionaire's ex, charity scandal, love for profit. The city that had once praised her now dissected her in headlines. Inside the hospital cafeteria, whispers turned into noise. She played him for money. She's using the charity for damage control. She always wanted the spotlight. Maya stood at the coffee counter, her hand trembling as she stirred sugar into her cup. The spoon clinked against the porcelain, like the ticking of a clock she couldn't stop. The barista, someone she saw every morning, avoided her eyes. She didn't drink the coffee. She just walked out. By the time she reached her office, reporters were already gathered outside the clinic gates, flashing cameras, shouting questions. Ms. Johnson, did you use Mr. King's donation to cover your debts? Are you still romantically involved? Was the charity a publicity front? Each word felt like glass cutting through skin. Inside, the staff avoided looking at her. Her assistant, young loyal, whispered, "We can release a statement, deny everything." But Maya couldn't find her voice. Every sentence she wanted to say turned into air. Then the door opened. Alexander stepped in his presence, immediately filling the room. His coat was soaked. He must have pushed through the press outside. "Maya," he said softly, "I'll handle this." She didn't look at him. "You can't." "Yes, I can. I'll call the board. I'll go on record. I'll stop. Her voice was sharp, brittle. Just stop. He froze. She turned toward him, eyes blazing through tears. Every time something breaks, you try to fix it by standing in front of me. You think that's love? It's not. It's control. I'm trying to protect you, he said. No, she snapped. You're protecting your guilt. He stepped back, stunned. You think this is about me being weak? She continued, her breath unsteady. It's not. It's about me needing to stand on my own, even if it kills me. Maya, she slammed her hand on the desk. If you save me one more time, Alex, I'll never be anything but the woman you rescued. The room went silent. The rain outside began to hammer the windows. For a moment, neither of them moved. Alexander's expression crumbled, the veneer of calm giving way to raw, unguarded pain. He wanted to reach her, to hold her, to say he was sorry, in every language his money could buy. But he knew that was exactly the problem. Maya picked up her coat, her movements trembling but determined. Where are you going? He asked. Somewhere without your shadow. He didn't try to stop her. This time he knew he shouldn't. Outside, the storm had broken. The rain was merciless cold needles on her skin, drowning out the noise of the reporters, the city, the accusations. She walked without knowing where to go. Past the alley where she once handed out free meals, past the clinic sign that now looked like a monument to her own naivety. The world blurred lights, water memories. She remembered the first time she'd met him, a young investor with a reckless smile full of impossible ideas. How they'd built everything together, and how easily it had all shattered when ambition outgrew love. And now, it was happening again. The harder she tried to save what they had rebuilt, the more it destroyed her. By the time she reached the park near the river, she was soaked through her hair, plastered to her face. The city lights shimmered across the water, like broken promises. She dropped to a bench, shaking furious at herself for still loving him, for still wanting his arms around her, even as she ran from him. Above her, thunder cracked. Somewhere inside, something cracked too. That night, Alexander sat alone in his glass-walled office downtown. The lights of the skyline blurred into streaks through the rain-covered windows. He hadn't changed out of his wet clothes. The city below looked small, insignificant, and for the first time, so did he. On the desk before him were two screens, one showing the news article that had started it all, the other an old photograph, the one Maya had found in the warehouse. Her laughter frozen in time, his younger self looking at her with everything he'd ever had to give. He touched the crack across the glass of the frame, his fingers tracing it like a wound that refused to heal. He whispered into the silence, I keep trying to fix what I broke, but maybe the only thing I can do, right, is nothing. Outside, lightning illuminated the city in white for a second, and then darkness swallowed it again. At that same moment in her small apartment, Maya sat on the floor with Liam asleep beside her. The boy had sensed her pain, the way children do, silently without questions. He had wrapped his arms around her earlier and said, Mommy, storms always end. She wanted to believe him. She turned off the television, the endless news cycle replaying the same footage, and looked at her reflection in the window. Her eyes were tired, but something in them still burned. Maybe he was right. Maybe this storm too would end. But she wasn't sure what would be left when it did. Back in his office, Alexander's phone buzzed again, his assistant's number flashing across the screen. He ignored it, staring at the rain. Each droplet sliding down the glass felt like a confession he could never make out loud. He remembered the night she gave birth, the one he hadn't been there for. The photo she sent afterward, Liam wrapped in a hospital blanket. He had zoomed in 1,000 times, just to see the tiny crease at the corner of her smile. That memory had been both his punishment and his prayer. Now sitting here, he realized something else. Love isn't about protecting someone from pain. It's about trusting them to survive it. And maybe, just maybe, letting them go was the truest form of love he could offer her. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The city smelled of wet asphalt and regret. Maya woke to the sound of her phone vibrating again, but this time it wasn't from reporters. It was from the clinic's financial officer. "Ms. Johnson," the voice said cautiously, "you should know. Mr. King just transferred full ownership of the charity to your name. He's resigning from all affiliations." Her breath caught. "He what?" "He sent an email this morning, effective immediately." She hung up, staring at the wall. He was walking away truly this time, and somehow that hurt more than any headline. That afternoon, a delivery arrived at the clinic, a sealed envelope addressed to her, no return name. Inside was the original foundation document they'd both signed years ago now, stamped with her name alone. Attached was a single note in his handwriting. "You were never the woman I saved, Maya. You were the one who built everything worth saving. A." Tears blurred the ink before she finished reading. She pressed the paper to her chest, whispering into the quiet, "You idiot. You finally learned how to love me when it was too late." That evening, far across the city, Alexander stood at his penthouse window. The skyline reflected in the glass like a sea of broken stars. The pain in his chest had grown sharper, a pulse that came and went like a warning. But for the first time in years, his heart felt strangely peaceful. He sat down, watching the rain return, softer this time, gentler. Maybe this was what it meant to truly let go. Hours later, Maya received a call she wasn't expecting. A man's voice, unfamiliar, hesitant. "Ms. Johnson, this is Dr. Patel from Northwestern Hospital. I'm sorry to disturb you, but you're listed as Mr. Alexander King's emergency contact." Her pulse froze. What happened? There was a pause on the other end, the kind that lasts forever. "Mr. King was admitted tonight. Cardiac failure. He's stable for now. But you should come." Outside her window, thunder rolled again, soft, distant, but coming closer. It had been 30 days since the night Maya's phone rang, with Dr. Patel's voice on the other end. 30 days since she stood under the cold fluorescent lights of Northwestern Hospital, watching Alexander fight for breath behind a wall of machines. In those 30 days, she had lived between guilt and exhaustion, running the clinic by day, sitting by his bedside by night. He had survived the cardiac failure. But survival, she learned, wasn't the same as healing. The morning of the press conference arrived with sunlight that felt untrustworthy, too bright, too polished, like a smile hiding pain. The King Johnson Foundation was hosting its first major event since the scandal. The ballroom shimmered with glass chandeliers and camera flashes. Every news outlet wanted a statement. Every reporter wanted redemption, or drama, or both. Maya stood backstage, heart pounding her reflection in the mirror, looking steadier than she felt. Her dress was simple ivory silk, no jewelry except the small gold bracelet Liam had made for her out of string. A volunteer whispered, "Ms. Johnson, Mr. King's car just arrived." She closed her eyes. He came. When Alexander stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He looked thinner, paler. The usual perfection of his suit couldn't hide the faint tremor in his hands. The world knew him as a billionaire, brilliant, ruthless, invincible. But the man who stood there now looked human, almost fragile. He walked to the podium, his gait slow but steady. His voice, when it came, was softer than anyone remembered. "Good afternoon," he began. "I'm Alexander King. Most of you know me for what I've built. Companies, brands, numbers. But today isn't about what I built. It's about what I broke, and what I was given the chance to rebuild." Maya watched from the wings, her breath caught in her throat. He continued, "1 month ago, my heart stopped. Doctors said it was stress exhaustion. Maybe luck that I'm still here. But I know the truth, it stopped because somewhere along the way, I forgot what it was beating for." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked, but he didn't look away. His gaze found Maya. "This foundation," he said, holding up a folder, "belongs entirely to Maya Johnson. Effective immediately, all operational and financial control will be under her leadership." A gasp moved through the room. Maya stepped forward, startled. He smiled faintly. "This isn't an act of repentance. It's gratitude." Because his voice broke. "For a second, she taught me that kindness doesn't belong in balance sheets. It lives in the quiet corners of the world, in hospitals, in broken hearts, in second chances." He turned toward her fully, now eyes glistening. "Maya, thank you for showing me what I forgot to see." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Maya's vision blurred. The cameras, the lights, the crowd, they all dissolved into noise. All she could see was him, the man who had once left her standing alone in a storm, now bearing his heart before the world. She walked toward him slowly. "Do you realize," she whispered when they met at center stage, "that's the first thing you've ever said that my heart was waiting to hear." He smiled, just barely. "Took me long enough, didn't it?" She didn't answer. She simply stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him. The crowd erupted into applause, polite, orchestrated, but somewhere beneath it was something real. For a fleeting moment they stood like that, two people who had lost and found each other too many times to count. The warmth between them felt almost new. But beneath that warmth was fear, the kind that comes when you realize love might not be enough to keep someone alive. Later, after the conference ended and the crowd thinned, Maya found him in the garden outside the venue. The evening light painted everything gold. He was sitting on a bench jacket, off tie undone, staring at the sky. She approached quietly. "You should be resting." He smiled without looking at her. "Doctors said the same thing, but it's hard to rest when you feel like every breath might be borrowed." "Don't talk like that." "I'm not being dramatic," he said softly. "Just honest." She sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "So, what happens now?" He looked at her, and for a moment, the old Alexander, the confident one, flickered back into view. "Now, you run the foundation, and I try to live a little longer." She swallowed hard. "That's not funny. It's not meant to be." The silence between them was thick but tender. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to give it all away." "I did," he said, "because it was never mine to keep. You built it. I only funded my own redemption." She looked at him, really looked. "And what about us, Alex? Do I get to keep that too, or was it just part of the handover?" His eyes softened. "Us," he repeated. "That's the one thing I've never been able to manage or measure." "Then stop trying to." "I can't," he said, "because the truth is, I never stopped loving you, Maya. Not for a day." The confession hung between them, trembling like a candle in the wind. She wanted to say she loved him too. The words rose in her throat, but so did the fear. Because love in her world was never just enough. It had to survive the weight of reality. And right now, reality was the quiet sound of his breath, catching every few minutes the faint tremor in his hands, the medical report she'd read when he wasn't looking. He turned toward her, suddenly eyes bright. You know what's strange? When I was lying in that hospital bed, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of not having done something that mattered. And did you? I think so, he said. If I die tomorrow at least, I'll know I left something that can keep saving people. Something that started because of you. Her voice trembled. Don't talk about dying. He smiled sadly. Then promise me you'll keep living, even if I'm not there to see it. She shook her head, tears forming. Don't make promises like that. You're going to live, Alex. You have to. He looked at her, his gaze tender but resigned. You always did believe in impossible things. Because you taught me to, she said. That broke him. He reached for her hand, the first time in years he dared to touch her. His fingers were cold, but his grip was steady. I don't know how to do this without you, he whispered. You'll have to learn, she said, her voice breaking. Because I won't let you die thinking I forgave you out of pity. I forgave you because I finally understood you didn't leave, because you stopped loving me. You left because you didn't know how to love yourself. He blinked hard, the tears finally falling. You always see me too clearly. That's what love does, she said. It doesn't blind, it reveals. A breeze swept through the garden, scattering rose petals across the marble path. Somewhere inside the building, the sound of clinking glasses and laughter drifted through the open doors. But here everything was still. He squeezed her hand once more. If I don't make it, she cut him off sharply. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Promise me you'll tell Liam who I was. He finished anyway, voice quiet but sure. Not what I did, who I was. Her tears fell freely now. He already knows. He calls you his almost hero. Alexander chuckled weakly. Almost, I'll take it. They sat there until the sun sank below the skyline. The world was tinted orange and gold, fading slowly into the deep blue of night. When she finally stood, he didn't follow. He just watched her. The woman who had been his beginning, his failure, and somehow still his salvation. Maya, he said softly. She turned. If there's ever another life after this one, he murmured, I hope I find you sooner and lose you slower. She wanted to run to him, to tell him there was still this life, that he didn't need another one. But she couldn't move, because deep down, she knew part of him was already saying goodbye. That night, she stood in her apartment staring out at the city lights. The bracelet Liam had made her glimmered faintly under the lamp. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Check your email. She frowned, opened her laptop, and found a single video file waiting in her inbox. The subject line read, For Maya, in case I forget to say it out loud. Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. Alexander's face appeared on the screen, pale but smiling, recorded from a hospital room. Hey, he said, voice rough but warm. If you're watching this, it means I ran out of courage before time. So here's what I didn't get to say. Her breath caught. Maya pressed pause halfway through, tears streaming. She couldn't finish it, not yet, because outside her window, sirens were wailing, faint at first, then louder, closer. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered that the storm wasn't over. Not yet. Late spring came softly to Chicago, wrapping the city in golden light. The air smelled of cut grass and wet earth, the kind of scent that carried memories. Maya had been at the clinic all afternoon reviewing files in the quiet hum of her office. Outside her window, children were laughing, chasing a soccer ball across the courtyard. She smiled absently until she heard the door creak open behind her. Mom Liam's voice was small but steady. Can I ask you something? She turned, lowering her glasses. He stood in the doorway, clutching his backpack, hair damp with sweat, eyes full of hesitation. "Of course, baby. What is it?" He shuffled his feet. "If you forgive Daddy." His voice faltered. "Can I start calling him Dad again?" The words caught her off guard. For a moment, the room seemed to still, as if even the air were waiting for her answer. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Forgive. Such a simple word, such a heavy thing. Maya walked to her son, crouched so their eyes met. "You can call him whatever feels right in your heart," she said softly. "That's between you and him." Liam nodded, uncertain, but she could see something bright flicker in his eyes, a hope he had long buried. When Alexander arrived that evening, Maya was already waiting on the porch. The tension between them was quieter now, not gone, but gentler, like a scar that still tingled when touched. He parked the car and stepped out, wearing that tentative smile she remembered from years ago, the one he used when he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "Hey," he said. "Hey." The silence between them was awkwardly tender. Then Liam darted out the front door, holding a basketball. "Daddy, play with me." Alexander froze for half a second, not because of the request, but because of that word. Daddy. It had been years since he'd heard it in his direction. He crouched down to his son's level voice, trembling slightly. "If you really want me to, I'd love to." Liam grinned, handing him the ball. "You have to go easy on me, though. I've been practicing." Alexander smiled. "Then maybe you should go easy on me." Maya watched from the porch as they jogged toward the small patch of asphalt near the garden. The sound of bouncing rubber filled the air, followed by laughter, real unguarded laughter that made her chest tighten. For years, she had built walls, strong, rational, necessary walls, to keep herself safe. But hearing her son's laughter echo with his father's broke something open inside her. Half an hour later, the game had turned into chaos. Liam inventing rules, Alexander pretending to lose, both of them drenched in evening light. At one point, the boy missed a shot and pouted. "I'll never be good at this," he sighed. Alexander knelt beside him. "Hey," he said gently. "When I was your age, I missed more shots than I made. The trick isn't about never missing, it's about never quitting." Liam looked up. "Is that how you got rich?" Alexander laughed softly. "No, that's how I got here playing ball with you." Maya felt her throat tighten. She turned away, pretending to tidy the porch, but tears blurred the edges of the fading sun. When she looked back, she saw Alexander teaching Liam how to dribble his large hands, guiding smaller ones, both of them focused and smiling. The sight hit her harder than she expected. Love, she realized, doesn't always return in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes back quietly disguised as forgiveness, passed between father and son. As the sky deepened to violet, they sat on the steps together, catching their breath. Alexander wiped sweat from his forehead and turned to Liam. "Hey, champ," he said softly. "You asked me something earlier about calling me Dad." Liam blinked. "Mom told you?" "She did." Alexander nodded. "But I want to say something too." He took a slow breath, and then for the first time since coming back, he knelt down until they were eye to eye. "You don't have to call me that until it feels right," he said. "But if you ever do, I promise I'll learn how to be one. You can teach me." "Okay." Liam's lip trembled before he threw his arms around his father's neck. "Okay." Maya looked away again, pretending to fix her hair, but her fingers were shaking. Sometimes she thought forgiveness doesn't start with the people who broke each other. It starts with the ones who never stopped believing they could be whole. Later that night after dinner, Maya stood by the kitchen sink rinsing dishes as she listened to their laughter in the living room. Liam had convinced Alexander to stay a little longer, and the two of them were now sprawled across the floor, building something out of toy blocks. From where she stood, she could see Alexander's hand, steadying a collapsing tower. He looked so natural, like that. Not the billionaire, not the man in headlines, just a father trying to earn his place in a story he once walked out of. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what life might have been like if he had never left. The dinners, the shared birthdays, the ordinary joy. Then she caught her reflection in the kitchen window, tired, older, but softer. Maybe she didn't want the past back. Maybe she wanted something new, something built not on promises, but on effort. When she turned off the faucet, the quiet felt different now. Not lonely, just waiting. Later, when Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, Alexander stood by the doorway, hesitant. "He's incredible," he said, his voice a mix of awe and guilt. "He is," Maya replied, tucking a blanket around their son. "He's also stubborn. Wonder where he got that from," he chuckled. "Definitely his mom." She smiled faintly, then looked up at him. "You're good with him." "I don't deserve that," he said. "Maybe not," she said, "but he needs it anyway." Their eyes met, and in that quiet something inside both of them shifted. Not quite reconciliation, not yet love, but the beginning of understanding. When he finally left that night, rain had started again, soft, steady. Maya walked him to the door. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? For letting me try?" She nodded. "Just don't try for me. Try for him." "I am," he said. "But it's him who's teaching me." Then he smiled, not the confident grin from his corporate portraits, but something humbler, almost boyish. He said I should come back tomorrow. There's a rematch. Maya laughed quietly. "Then you better rest your knees." When the door closed behind him, she leaned against it, her heartbeat unsteady. Outside, his taillights disappeared down the street. Inside, the house felt full again, full of laughter, full of questions, full of something dangerously close to hope. That night, as she stood by Liam's bedside, watching him sleep, Maya whispered, "You're teaching both of us how to be brave, aren't you?" The boy stirred, murmuring something in his dream, one word, that made her smile through her tears. "Daddy." A week later, while Maya was preparing for the Foundation's annual gala, a new message arrived in her inbox from the City Board. Subject: Audit Notice. King Johnson Foundation. Body: We've received a complaint questioning the recent ownership transfer. Please be prepared to provide full documentation and financial transparency. Her hand went cold on the mouse. Across the city, Alexander's phone buzzed with the same message. For the first time in weeks, both of them felt the familiar tension return, that reminder that peace, like love, never came without a cost. The morning of the opening arrived like a quiet miracle. Chicago was draped in gold, the sunlight spilling through clouds that had once seemed endless. Reporters gathered outside the new community center, the gleaming white building that stood at the corner of West Madison Avenue. Its name, carved in glass, caught the light: King Johnson Foundation. Two names, one story. Inside, everything smelled of fresh paint and hope. Maya moved through the atrium, her heels echoing against the marble floor. She trailed her fingers along the polished wall where photographs of the Foundation's early work were displayed, smiling children, restored homes, the faces of those whose lives had quietly changed. For the first time in years, she felt proud without hesitation. Not because of the building, but because of what it represented: survival, redemption, and something fragile that had learned how to bloom again. Then she saw him. Alexander stood near the stage, straightening his tie, the same navy suit he used to wear to board meetings. But today, it looked different, lighter. His hair was dusted with silver now, and the lines around his eyes had softened, carved by time and forgiveness rather than stress. When he turned his gaze, found hers, immediately, as if every noise in the room faded between them. "You're early," she said, walking up to him. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Kept thinking I'd wake up and this would all be gone." Maya smiled faintly. "It's real, Alex. You did it." He shook his head. "We did it." Before the ceremony began, he took her aside, away from the noise and cameras. In his hand was a small velvet box, not for a ring, but for something else. He opened it and pulled out a single elegant key. It gleamed softly in the morning light. "This belongs to you," he said, "the official key to the foundation." Maya hesitated. "You don't have to." "I do," he said firmly, "because this time the contract doesn't have an end clause." Her lips parted in surprise. "No end clause." He smiled. Not the polished CEO smile of old, but one born from sincerity. "Because it's signed with the heart, not ink." She laughed softly but genuinely, the sound warming the air between them. "You've been practicing that line, haven't you?" He shrugged. "A little. But it's true." For a heartbeat, the world stilled, the kind of silence that holds more meaning than any speech ever could. When the ceremony began, the courtyard filled with applause and light. Journalists snapped photos, local officials gave speeches, and children from the nearby community sang in welcome. Maya stood beside Alexander on the stage, her hand unconsciously brushing his. Liam stood between them, fidgeting with the oversized scissors he'd been given for the ribbon cutting. As the mayor handed Alexander the microphone, he hesitated before speaking, not out of nerves, but reverence. "I spent most of my life believing success was measured by numbers," he began, his voice steady but low, "by stock values, acquisitions, and growth charts. But there are no charts for kindness, no spreadsheets for grace." He turned slightly toward Maya. "What you see today isn't a monument to money. It's a promise. That people can change, that broken things can be rebuilt, and sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in." Maya's eyes glistened. Alexander continued, his words now softer. "This foundation exists because one woman refused to stop believing that compassion could outlast pain. And because a boy reminded us both that love is something you learn, not something you own." He nodded to Liam. "He's the real teacher here." Laughter rippled through the crowd, gentle and warm. When he handed the microphone to Maya, her fingers brushed his. "You never were good at short speeches," she teased quietly. "Old habits," he murmured back. Maya took a breath, facing the crowd. "We built this center for the forgotten, for anyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. But maybe deep down, it's also for ourselves." She glanced at Alexander and smiled through her tears. "Because even those who fall apart deserve a place to begin again." The applause that followed was thunderous, but to her the real music was the quiet squeeze of Liam's hand in hers. When the time came to cut the ribbon, Liam insisted on holding the scissors. Together, he said solemnly, looking at both of them. Maya laughed. "Of course, Captain." Alexander knelt down beside him. "On 3-1, Maya counted. 2, Alexander added. Liam grinned wide. 3, the ribbon snapped cleanly, fluttering to the ground like the last remnant of an old chapter. Cameras flashed, applause erupted, but Maya didn't hear any of it. She was watching Alexander, the way the morning light reflected in his eyes, how the lines of worry had softened into something almost peaceful. For the first time since their world had fallen apart, she saw not the man who left, but the one who had finally found his way back. And for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, second chances weren't fiction. Later, after the crowd dispersed and the stage was quiet again, the three of them walked through the empty halls of the new building. Liam ran ahead, exploring every room like it was a castle. His laughter echoed against the walls, pure and alive. Maya turned to Alexander. "You realize he's going to claim every office before we do." "I'll let him," Alexander said, smiling. "He's got better instincts than both of us." They stopped by a large window overlooking the courtyard. The sunlight poured in, catching motes of dust in the air, small constellations dancing between them. Maya's voice was quiet. "It's strange. For so long I thought forgiveness was the end of something. But it feels more like the beginning." Alexander nodded slowly. "That's because it is." She turned to him, eyes searching his. "And what about us, Alex? Are we beginning to?" He hesitated, then said softly, "We could be, if you still believe in beginnings." She looked at him for a long time before whispering, "I never stopped." Their hands found each other, tentative, uncertain, but real. That night, the foundation glowed under the city lights. From the street, the glass walls shimmered like water, reflecting the faces of everyone who had gathered earlier that day: the volunteers, the families, the dreamers. Inside, three shadows lingered near the front doors: a man, a woman, and a boy. Liam tugged at Alexander's sleeve. "Daddy, when people come here tomorrow, what will they see first?" Alexander smiled. "Hope," he said. "That's the first thing they'll see." The boy nodded, solemnly satisfied with that answer. When Maya later walked alone through the empty corridors, she passed by the plaque mounted near the entrance. The inscription read, "For the ones who believed too late and the ones who never stopped believing." She touched the words lightly, her reflection shimmering on the brass surface. Her heart felt full, not perfect, but whole in a new way. But just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed in her hand. Message from Northwestern Hospital. Subject: follow-up. Test results. Alexander King. Her chest tightened. The light around her seemed to shift, the hum of the building dimming into silence. She hesitated for a long time before opening it. The message was brief: a request for Alexander to return for further cardiac evaluation. Possible complications. Urgent. Maya's fingers trembled around the phone. In the next room, she could still hear Liam laughing, Alexander's voice joining his. The sound was soft, full of life. She stood there, the joy of the morning colliding with the weight of uncertainty. Outside, the city wind stirred, rustling the new banner that fluttered over the entrance where healing begins. And Maya wondered for the first time in a long while whether healing ever truly ended, or if it simply changed shape, like love itself. That night, when the foundation lights finally dimmed, Alexander sat alone in his office, reviewing the message on his own phone. He pressed a hand against his chest, not in pain, but in acknowledgement. He whispered to the empty room, "Not yet. Not before she knows." Then he looked out the window toward the city skyline, glowing like a promise he still intended to keep. The hospital looked smaller than Maya remembered. The old brick facade was faded now, ivy climbing the edges of the windows like the hands of time, refusing to let go. Yet somehow it felt softer, like the past itself had exhaled. It had been 1 year since the foundation opened, 1 year since they had promised to build not just walls of glass and steel, but something unbreakable inside themselves. Maya held a small bouquet of white lilies in her hands. She could feel the pulse in her wrist, steady, quiet. The scent of antiseptic and coffee filled the air as automatic doors slid open before her, welcoming her back to where it all began. The reception desk was the same pale wood, same flickering fluorescent light. She smiled at the familiarity at the ghosts that still lingered here in gentle ways. This place, she whispered, it held so many endings. And yet, here we are. Alexander stood beside her, his hand brushing hers. His hair was a little grayer now, his face a little leaner. A quiet strength radiated from him, the kind that only comes after surviving yourself. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. "Do you remember what you told me the day I left Maya?" Tilted her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Which time?" "The last one," he said softly. "You said, don't come back until you know what love really costs." She looked down, the memory stinging even after all these years. "And did you?" He nodded. "Every minute without you was the interest I paid." The words hit her like sunlight breaking through cloud, too warm, too honest to deflect. They walked slowly down the hall, past rooms filled with new lives and second chances. Nurses passed by with gentle smiles, unaware of the history that had once bled into these walls. At the corner, they stopped the very hallway where they had first seen each other, again soaked in rain and regret. Maya set the bouquet on the counter, her fingers lingering over the petals. "For those who once believed they weren't worthy of love," she murmured. Alexander stood beside her, his reflection joining hers in the polished surface of the desk. "You were never unworthy, Maya. You were just waiting for someone brave enough to see you." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "And you?" she asked. "Did you ever learn to see yourself?" He smiled faintly. "I'm still learning, but this time I'm not doing it alone." They sat on a bench near the window, the same spot where years ago she had cried over a patient lost and a love she thought she'd buried. Outside, spring sunlight spilled across the city streets, bright and restless. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Alexander broke the silence. "I got the all clear last month," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "Your heart?" He nodded. "Apparently it's stubborn, like its owner." Maya laughed through the relief that surged inside her. Guess it finally learned how to keep beating for the right reasons. He looked at her, and something in his gaze was different now, softer, freer. "I used to think love was about winning, about holding on so tightly that it couldn't escape. But now," he took her hand gently, "now I think love is about choosing. Every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Maya squeezed his fingers. "Then, let's keep choosing. Together." She smiled. "Always." Liam's voice broke through their quiet moment. "Mom, Dad, come on." They turned to see him bounding down the hall, holding a paper bag from the cafeteria. "They have your favorite muffins, Mom? The ones with too many blueberries?" Maya laughed. "You remembered. Of course, Daddy says when you love someone, you learn their favorites and never forget." Alexander coughed, pretending to look embarrassed. "I might have said that once or twice." The boy grinned, more like 100 times. They laughed together, the kind of laughter that didn't erase pain, but softened. It made it human. As they stepped outside into the courtyard, the city opened around them, the noise of life, the shimmer of possibility. A photographer from the foundation had been waiting to capture a few family shots for their annual report. "Just one picture, please," the woman said. "It's for the anniversary issue." Maya hesitated, but Alexander nodded, slipping his arm around her shoulders. Liam wedged himself between them, holding both their hands. The photographer lifted her camera. "All right. 3, 2. "Wait," Liam shouted, looking up at his parents. "Can we do it like this?" He tugged them closer until their foreheads touched a circle of warmth, laughter, and quiet redemption. The shutter clicked. It was a photograph not of perfection but of promise. 3 souls, who had once been broken now whole, because they had chosen to begin again. Afterward, they lingered in the sunlight. Maya leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. You know, I used to think love was something that happened to you, like an accident. He turned to her. And now I think it's a decision. To stay, to forgive, to hope even when the odds say otherwise. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then today, I choose you. Again. For as long as my heart remembers how to beat. Maya's voice trembled. And I choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to. Then she kissed him, slow Orton, the kind of kiss that carried both grief and grace. Around them, the city seemed to hum louder, as if the world itself were exhaling. Liam's laughter broke the spell. You're doing that grown-up kissing thing again. They pulled apart, laughing, their foreheads still touching. Alexander whispered, Get used to it, kid. This is what forever looks like. Later that evening, the 3 of them walked along the lakefront. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. Maya's hand rested in Alexander's. Liam ran ahead, chasing the reflection of light across the water. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't scare her. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be theirs. She turned to Alexander. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met again? He looked at her, thoughtful. I used to, but now I think we would have found our way back eventually. Because some stories don't end, they just wait. Maya smiled, the wind brushing against her cheek like a benediction. Then let's make sure this one keeps going. He squeezed her hand gently, page by page. As night fell, they returned home to warmth, to laughter, to the quiet miracle of choosing each other after everything. From the window, the city lights glittered like scattered stars. Maya stood watching them, feeling Alexander's arm slide around her waist. Do you think, she murmured, that love ever truly ends? He kissed her temple. No, it just changes shape like light, finding new glass to shine through. She turned to him, smiling through tears. Then let's keep shining. Love isn't something we find, it's something we choose to keep, even after losing it. If you've ever been afraid to love again, remember this. The human heart is like the sunrise. It can begin again every single day. As the lights in their home dimmed, Maya's phone buzzed softly on the counter, a message from the Foundation's board. Subject: invitation to the Global Humanitarian Awards. Paris. She glanced at Alexander. Paris. He smiled. A new chapter, maybe? She grinned, leaning into his chest. Then let's write it together. Outside, dawn began to bloom across the horizon. Proof that some stories don't just end happily. They begin there.